Hi, welcome to Hollywood Crime Scene. This is Rachel Fisher.
Hi, this is Desi Jedeikin, and today we are going to talk about silent movie star and I guess comic Fatty Arbuckle, who I think has largely been forgotten today. The first time I heard about him was in the book Hollywood Babylon, and that was pretty much focused on his downfall. So, in my opinion, and I think most people who probably know him from that book, he's a rapist and a murderer.
Exactly. And unlike John Holmes, my opinion of Fatty prior to doing research and learning about him was pretty negative. I really only had a one-sided view of him. I didn't know anything about his early life or about his film career, just that, oh, this is a guy who killed a bitch.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, she might have been a nice person.
I'm sure she was. I don't know
but
why.
bitch is affectionate.
Look, that just came out of my
Yeah.
mouth. I'm very sorry.
Anyway, so from 1914 to 1921, Fatty Arbuckle was one of the biggest stars in the world. In fact, he was one of the first bona fide movie stars. Up until that point, up until he came around in like 1914, studios actually did everything they could to make the actors and performers in their movies anonymous, so to sort of keep them out of power. But audiences quickly started giving them kind of nicknames like the girl with curls and things like that. So I think about 1912, so slightly before he came around, actors started becoming more well known. And with that, the voracious appetite for any and all kind of information about their lives also became something that fans craved. So that's sort of around the same time that the gossipy tabloid industry rose to feed that appetite. So the irony is that the stardom that Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle obtained is eventually what led to his truly like OJ level fall from grace.
Downfall.
Yeah.
It's a pretty bad fall from grace.
Okay. So I'm going to give a little bit of his early life so we can kind of see where he came from. So Fatty Arbuckle was born fat, basically. He weighed 13 pounds at
Jesus
birth, which is a
Christ.
massive fucking baby.
Rest in peace, Mrs. Arbuckle's pussy.
Yeah. And his dad is very skinny, so he immediately questions the paternity of the baby based
You give
purely
birth to this fat kid? This is
Yeah.
not mine.
and he actually named him after his least favorite politician, Republican Roscoe Conkling. Like, so this is the level of petty dick his dad was.
Wow.
And then, to make matters worse, his dad beat him throughout his life because he thought he was an illegitimate child, which makes no sense. I mean, I'm not saying he should have beat the wife, but if you think the wife was the one, the kid didn't do anything regardless, and neither did the mom. But the mom was very supportive of her son. But she had 9 babies, including a huge fat one.
Dude,
and
again, rest in peace.
And she suffered health issues because of that. She eventually died when Fatty was 12, and most of the research I saw, it was she died when he was 12 and 180 pounds. It's just like, really?
So they're going to fat shame him?
They're fat shaming him from a very young age. And so he at that point was basically an orphan because his dad wanted nothing to do with him. So one thing that Fatty did have was that he had a beautiful singing voice. In fact, it was so beautiful that a famous opera singer at the time, Enrico Caruso, once heard him sing and urged him to give up this nonsense, meaning comedy, you do for a living. With training, you could become the second greatest singer in the world, which is like a nice sort of subtle shade because obviously he's the first greatest singer. And that's the shade that I sort of really fucking love. In addition to the beautiful voice, as mentioned before, he had a really graceful way about him, despite his size. I always think about like comparing him to like the ballet dancing hippos in Fantasia.
Right.
Like that sort of like, wow.
This
They're
juxtaposition of
yeah, they're
what
very
you-
graceful
Right.
despite their like massive thing on their tiptoes. And then he has like a sort of Hollywood lore thing about how he got into the business or his sort of big break. He was auditioning for a vaudeville review, and they literally had the thing, like the hook that would come and pull people off the stage when the audience didn't respond to them or they were booing or whatever. So he was on stage doing whatever, some kind of pratfally, slapstick comedy thing. And he was bombing. When he saw the hook come at him, he, instead of getting pulled off, which I love to think of how big that hook would have had to be to get around his belly.
Like, we got to use
I'm
the
messing.
jumbo
It's like,
hook.
yeah, get out the big one. We need a bigger hook. We're going to need a bigger hook. That's my lame Jaws joke. He somersaulted into the orchestra pit, and voila, a star was born. The audience ate it up. No pun intended or whatever.
This whole episode's going to be all fat jokes, by the way.
Unintentionally. Sorry. I can do better. I'm sorry. So after touring with this vaudeville circuit, he began to make one-reelers and became a regular in the Mack Sennett Keystone Cop series, which was a big series at the time. And he started a successful partnership with the actress Mabel Normand, and that's when his career really took off. He began directing and producing. He mentored both Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. And because stars were now a big thing, Arbuckle could make big demands from the studio. In 1914, he was being paid $1,000 a day and getting 25% of the profits and full artistic control, which is like some Louis C.K. kind of fucking shit.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money back then. But the artistic control, I think, is something most people don't get.
Right.
So by 1918, he signed a contract that gave him $1 million a year for 3 years.
Wow.
Some interesting things about his career. Although his size was for sure part of his success, he never used it as a cheap gag, like, being stuck in a doggy door or something like that. It was always used more as the contrast to the graceful movement. Although he did kind of pioneer the whole pie in the face gag thing.
Who doesn't love a good cream pie in the face?
Yeah, exactly. Our fucking favorite.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, I keep saying Fatty was sort of his on-screen presence, and that was like sort of his name, but he never went by it in person. He also was sort of had a female character that was named Miss Fatty, so I don't know.
Early drag there.
Yeah, early drag.
We posted some pictures on our Instagram.
He was also called the Balloonatic, and my favorite, the Prince of Wales, spelled Whales. So at this point now, before we get into what I'm going to talk about next, you have to understand that he was like the Tom Cruise level of fame, like as big as you could get, but with kind of like a Chris Farley type personality. So he's like pretty much the biggest movie star in the world. Okay. So on September 5th, 1921, Fatty was going to take a break from his hectic schedule, and he was going to go away with his friend Frank Fishbach. They were planning a little Labor Day weekend excursion party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. The trip was almost canceled because Fatty sat on an acid-soaked rag at the garage where his car was being serviced, and he got second-degree burns all over his ass.
I'm sorry, but if I got any kind of burn on my ass, I'd be like, we
cancel
need to reschedule.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit on a donut seat all the way on the ride up to San Francisco.
Right.
My ass hurts.
Well, and Fred was not having it. Fred actually bought him a donut-sized thing, like a rubber ring for him to sit on for the drive up north. They had 3 rooms at the St. Francis Hotel, 1219, 1220, and 1221. And 1220 was kind of the party room. And then you had the rooms on the side for their personal endeavors. This was also during Prohibition, so it was full of illegal booze and girls. It's sort of the old school version of like a rock star hotel bashing, like just fucking the room up sort of party.
And these 1920s Prohibition era parties always sound like the most fun and the most debauched.
Right? Yeah. So this was sort of, a fangirl party thing. No mud sharks at this one. Unfortunately. But one of the guests was 26-year-old model, wannabe starlet, Virginia. I'm going to say her name is pronounced Rappe or Rappe.
I say Rappe,
but
like shoppy.
Because I don't want to say rape, but it is spelled Rappe. So I'm going to say Rappe, right?
That's how I would say it.
I mean, if I was her, I would have fucking fancied that shit up.
Right.
So she had worked in some way with Mack Sennett at the time. So maybe that's sort of how they were connected, but I didn't see that officially. So don't hold me to that. So here's what is clear. At some point, Virginia Rapay fell ill and a hotel doctor was called. She stayed at the hotel a few more days, recovering before she was taken to a hospital on September 9th. And it was there that she died of peritonitis caused by a ruptured bladder. Now, there probably would have been some sort of scandal or investigation regardless, but it was another woman at the party, Maud Bambina Delmont, which is like a great 1920s or whatever sort of name. And she was a friend of Virginia's that took shit to the next level. She told the doctor at the hospital treating Virginia that Arbuckle had raped her friend. And then she made the same accusation to the San Francisco police, claiming that Arbuckle had been seen dragging Rapay into his bedroom against her will, claiming he was going to, claiming that she claimed that he said, "I've waited 5 years for you and now I've got you."
Wow.
So it's like all very Penelope Pit Stop with like, tying someone on the train tracks or whatever. In an interview with a newspaper, she said that she could hear Virginia. I mean, I should say that obviously this is a story where the tabloidy newspaper kind of things fucking latched onto it right away.
They ran with it.
Right, they ran with it. So she's being interviewed by a newspaper. She said she could hear Virginia screaming and kicking violently, and that she had to kick down the door, and Fatty opened it in his pajamas, wearing Virginia's hat cocked at an angle and smiling like an evil kind of foolish
smile. So to add insult to injury is wearing her hat too.
Right. And then she could see like behind him that Virginia was on the bed, ravaged, screaming in agony. And she said that Arbuckle said to her, "Shut her up or I'll throw her out the window." I mean, like she really painted Arbuckle as like a maniacal fucking lunatic.
Right.
Then she said that he left her there and went back to the party and just danced while Virginia lay dying.
With a ruptured bladder.
Right. At some point during this whole thing, there was someone who reported that she said randomly, "He did this to me." So that's sort of like famous last words.
Right.
According to Arbuckle, the event went more like this. Virginia had a few drinks and at some point she became hysterical. She complained she couldn't breathe and started tearing her clothes off. He claimed that he was never alone with her until he found her in the bathroom vomiting, and that's when he carried her into the bedroom. So in his version,
he was like the good guy.
He's a good guy. he's an online male feminist.
Which I'm sorry, but
right.
Both versions, not to jump the gun, but both versions sound like pretty elaborate.
Maybe it was something in between. I don't know.
Right.
But anyways, we're gonna
explore all the evidence.
Explore what happens next. So the aftermath of the crime. The police concluded that the 265-pound comedian, for some reason his weight is always mentioned in these
Welcome
reports.
to being a woman, Fatty.
Had supposedly burst her bladder with his weight during the assaults. Because he was so fat, he literally punctured her bladder or something, burst it. And because the injury had gone untreated, it developed into an infection that killed her. One witness eventually testified that Arbuckle had rubbed ice on her stomach to ease the abdominal pain. So it's like a whole mixture of like him being this maniacal, crazy
this
person,
really protective
and this
guy.
very protective guy just trying to fucking help. At this point, the Hearst newspapers really fucking ran with the story and went hog fucking wild.
Were they like the OG TMZ?
Yeah,
this
is like William Randolph Hearst, the Citizen Kane guy.
Yes,
who was kind of known for that yellow journalism and just running with things. And most of the juicy Hollywood Babylon tidbits and story come from the Hearst version of what happened.
So they were very sensationalized.
Right. And the reason I brought up that ice actually before was there was a rumor that was sort of based on the ice that it's, and this is from Virginia's manager, a guy named Al Semnacher, I don't know. Semnachos, who the fuck cares? And he accused Arbuckle of using a piece of ice to simulate sex with her, which led to the injuries.
Like an ice sculpture?
I guess like they broke off like Cupid's hand. I have no idea.
Fisted her with an icy Cupid hand.
And then so these are some of the Hearst paper
they published
salacious
these.
details.
They're claiming
another
this.
rumor was that he was so drunk that he couldn't get hard, and so he raped Virginia with a used Coke bottle Some accounts jazz it up a bit with a champagne bottle to just make it a little bit more.
I would want that to be the rumor.
I mean, yeah. And then that's sort of what caused her bladder to rupture. And the headlines already at this point are like, San Francisco booze party kills young actress. And then there were pleas in the newspapers to get Roscoe. So he was already like, let's get him. Like,
right.
No one fucking cared at the time what the truth was. People were living for this. They were here for it. Like, everyone didn't want to know. It's like when you hear something so juicy, like the piss tape with Trump. I don't even fucking care if it's true.
I want to like, that it's true.
So it was sort of like the equivalent of that, where you just don't even care. You want to believe it. And then at some point,
I mean, this is probably like the first big Hollywood scandal.
Oh, totally. Because there weren't any stars before this.
Right.
So this was the first big, huge Hollywood
scandal. Just imagine being a regular citizen hearing about this.
Yeah.
It's blows pretty your crazy fucking mind.
Yeah. So, and even Hearst himself said that the scandal had sold more newspapers than any event since the sinking of the Lusitania, which was his last big yellow journalism scandal. Morality groups were in play here too, and they were calling for Arbuckle to be sentenced to death. Like,
damn,
that's how crazy it was. Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton were two of the few people who were standing up for him, and I feel like they had the star power to kind of take that risk.
Yeah.
Some interesting speculation on why it was so easy to go down this road with him was people were really quick to believe the worst about him because of the image that he had cultivated, that he was overweight and had like an asexual screen presence.
So he's this creepy loner guy.
Yeah. So he was kind of portrayed as this unlikely ladies' man in fan magazines, which wasn't really true. So because he had this reputation as like, I'm fat, but I can still get it.
He's this sinister
They had built up
guy.
This thing where it was very easy for people to be like, oh, well, that's how he gets it. He's a sexual deviant.
Right.
San Francisco DA at the time, Matthew Brady, really had no evidence, and other than the testimony of that friend, and he nonetheless charged Arbuckle with first-degree murder, which was eventually reduced to manslaughter. The problem was his one-star witness, Maud Bambina Delmont, ended up being shady as fuck. She had a police record containing more than 50 counts of crimes, including bigamy, fraud, racketeering, extortion, to name a few. I mean, when you have 50 counts.
I want to see the movie about this Bambina chick's life story.
And on top of that, as if that wasn't enough, police also found telegrams from Maud pretty much confessing to the fact that she was trying to blackmail Arbuckle, including one telegram that said, "We have Roscoe Arbuckle in a hole. Here's our chance to make some money out of him."
Oh, God.
But Brady was ambitious as fuck, and he was hoping to make a name for himself with what was pretty much the trial of the century at that point.
Wow.
There is like one other chance that the case could be dropped if the judge, Sylvain Lazarus, decided to dismiss the case based on no evidence. But he decided to let it go through. And here's his statement, which I found pretty fucking incredible with a very minimal amount of knowledge about the Constitution. Even I was like, wow, that seems really fucked. So here's his statement. "I do not find any evidence that Mr. Arbuckle either committed or attempted to commit rape. The court has been presented with the merest outline. The district attorney has presented barely enough facts to justify my holding the defendant on the charge, which is here filed against him. But we are not trying Roscoe Arbuckle alone. We are trying the screen celebrity who has given joy and pleasure to the entire world. We are actually gentlemen, or we are not trying to try that person. We are actually gentlemen trying ourselves. We are trying our present-day morals, our present-day social conditions, our present-day looseness of thought and lack of social balance."
So this guy wanted to make an example.
He's trying the world for their sins, basically.
I feel like he's not a very good judge.
This seems very unconstitutional to me.
Right.
Even more fucked up than that, Brady knew he couldn't let Maud Delmont testify because she had already changed her story like a million times and was a pathological liar. And I guess this is in the day where like, I think nowadays you don't even put those people on the stand, right? Or take them seriously.
They're not good witnesses.
So he had her arrested on one of the outstanding charges of bigamy.
What is bigamy?
when you're married to more than one person.
Oh, right. Oh, like polygamy.
Right. So she was probably marrying people for money or something like that.
Yeah.
Then the one person who started this whole fucking thing wasn't even trying. She spent the next several months in jail, and which made Arbuckle's attorneys not able to question her. So yeah, the trial. The People versus Arbuckle lasted from November 14th to December 4th, 1921, and more than 60 witnesses were called to the stand, including 18 doctors. There was a lot of testimony about this woman's bladder.
Fuck.
Party guests, doctors, nurses, they were all witnesses for the prosecution, and it was all freaking horseshit hearsay city. All of their testimony pretty much crumbled under cross-examination because everyone was basically lying or just saying things without really knowing and taking guesses.
Heard.
Yeah.
Right.
Arbuckle actually took the stand, which is pretty rare, I think, in these kind of things. He was a great witness. He calmly testified. He told his story. He was consistent even under cross-examination from Assistant DA Leo Friedman.
Did he admit to having sex with her? Or
No.
No?
No,
Okay.
he claims he never did anything.
Okay.
The Assistant DA Leo Friedman was trying to make Arbuckle admit that he refused to call a doctor when he found Virginia sick, and that he knew of her previous illnesses. She had some like history of having sort of reproductive health problems. And that because Arbuckle knew that he refused to call the doctor, it was and saw it as the perfect opportunity to rape and kill her. Like, I'll rape and kill her, and then she'll die of a rupture. Like, yeah, I mean, that's a very bad plan.
Right.
So
that's a John Holmes level plan.
He never admitted to that because it wasn't true, probably. On December 4th, after 44 hours of deliberation, the jury announced that it was hopelessly deadlocked, and the judge declared a mistrial. He would have most likely been acquitted, but there was one holdout juror named Helen Hubbard who told jurors that she would vote guilty until hell froze over.
Helen?
Yeah, fuck you, Helen. She didn't look at the evidence. She didn't look at the transcripts. She had made up her mind by the time she left the courtroom.
She's like, I don't like fat people.
Right. The other interesting aspect was that her husband was a lawyer who did business with the DA's office, and she afterwards claimed that even she was surprised she made it onto the jury. So the whole thing is like a fucking mess.
It's a shit show.
So there was a second trial, and that began on January 11th and lasted until February 3rd. There was more shady testimony, and then one witness from the first trial even testified that Brady had forced her to commit perjury. Arbuckle's lawyers were pretty confident that he would win or be acquitted, and they didn't have him testify the second time. And that was a huge mistake because the jury deadlocked 9-3 in favor of conviction this time. I also saw that it said 10-2 in one case, but it doesn't really matter. But so it went from like one holdout juror to all of a sudden swinging
people
for
like,
conviction.
Hey, wait a minute.
So the case went to trial a third time on March 13th. A side note, at this time, that woman, Maud Delmont, was out of jail, and she was already touring the country giving a one-woman show as the woman who signed the murder charge against Arbuckle and lecturing about the evils of Hollywood. So this bitch was getting hers. Like,
she was capitalizing.
She's like, I didn't get that blackmail money, but I'm going to make do, which is like sort of admirable in like a shitty kind of way.
She reminds me of Roxy Hart from Chicago.
Totally. Like
taking advantage of
she
this
took
situation.
advantage. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll give her credit.
Her character is not that credible.
Up until this point, to Arbuckle's credit, he didn't want his lawyers to take the victim blaming route.
Wow.
That all changed in this trial because now they were like, we need to fucking end this.
Right.
So they left nothing to chance, and they went full on victim blaming here. And Arbuckle testified this time again. They talked about Virginia's character, and they went into details. She had 5 abortions, things like that. She had a series of bladder inflammations, chronic cystitis. And then she also had a history of actually stripping naked when she drank. I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah, I don't feel like that's that weird.
And that she had gonorrhea at the time of her death. There was even some testimony that she had been pregnant and asked Arbuckle to pay for her abortion. So, I mean, I feel like, yeah, I don't see that as necessarily throwing her under the bus. They had to present the evidence that she had a history of chronic illnesses in that area.
The medical stuff makes sense to me, but
The sexual,
the stripping while naked just seems like victim blaming.
oh, I don't agree with that actually, because that was sort of the thing that they said she was naked and writhing.
Right,
so I feel like they had to say she did this a lot. It wasn't
Right.
her screaming, running naked from a room because he did something.
So it was something she liked to do in the past.
Right. So I feel like it was sort of relevant.
Right.
So I think at this point his career was dead. The previous trials had bankrupted him. So he really kind of had no choice but to maybe slightly slut shame away. There were numerous witnesses called to the stand testifying to Virginia's slutty ways. So maybe that's a little bit more inappropriate.
Like, yeah, she gave a great blowjob.
And one person in this, one person who was a witness actually also attacked Maud Delmont in her testimony, saying that she was the complaining witness that never witnessed. So very 1920s.
Sounds like a movie.
The jury deliberated this time for less than 5 minutes. They returned to the court and declared him not guilty. They even released a statement, which is extremely rare at the time, saying that they were not only acquitting him, but they were actually finding him innocent. And this is that statement. We, the jury, find Roscoe Arbuckle not guilty of manslaughter. Acquittal is not enough for Roscoe Arbuckle. We feel that a great injustice has been done to him. We feel also that it was our plain duty to give him this exoneration under the evidence, for there was not the slightest proof adduced to connect him in any way with the commission of a crime. He was manly throughout the case, okay, whatever, and told a straightforward story on the witness stand, which we all believe. The happening at the hotel was an unfortunate affair for which Arbuckle, so the evidence shows, was in no way responsible. We wish him success. Roscoe Arbuckle is entirely innocent and free from all blame.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a statement.
Yeah, so that was beyond just not guilty. This was saying,
right,
bitch, this is fucked up. And he...
But clearly...
Yeah. And you know what? It seems like that is true. It was just a fucked up thing that happened.
Right. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right. So he was ruined though, still, despite the exoneration.
That statement, that just goes to show when you get a stain on you like that, it does not come out. Whether you're, I mean,
sorry, I'm definitely not going down any other road with that statement. No, it's true. It was too fucking far gone by that point.
Right.
The public had made him a symbol of Hollywood excess, and in their eyes, he was guilty of, at the very least, fucking too hard and drinking too much. Which is like kind of makes him very appealing to me. So the aftermath of this was that he pretty much had no fucking chance of making money again. And that was officially fucked even further. 6 days after that, after his acquittal, something called the Hayes Office had been created at that point. And it was sort of the censoring board for the film industry. They banned him from the screen due to like him breaking what was sort of a newly minted thing, contracts having morality clauses.
Right.
And the studios were now forcing them to abide by these things, which kind of let them get out of contracts if they acted up in any sort of way.
So they really wanted to distance themselves from him.
And then the truth of the matter is, what was really behind it was the fact that Paramount, his studio that he had that $3 million deal with, they didn't want to work with him anymore, but they didn't want anyone else to have him either. So it was like a way of...
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was that's why the Hayes office banned him from the screen. And they had like all kinds of deals with each other. It was a very corrupt system. So actually the ban was lifted 8 months later, but by that point he was just blackballed completely from Hollywood. Over the next decade, he kind of did whatever he could. He did live performances. He even directed under an alias, William B. Goodrich, Will Be Good. And then 10 years after the trials in 1932, Jack Warner hired him again to act in a film that ended up being a huge box office success. And then he signed Arbuckle for 6 more films, which was a great thing.
That's Arbuckle, a pretty lucky break.
Yeah. Arbuckle had remarried at this point. And he went out to dinner with his wife that night to celebrate his newfound sort of comeback. He went home to bed that night, and he died in his sleep at 2:30 a.m. after suffering a heart attack. Supposedly, he had said to his wife earlier that evening, "This is the best day of my life," which is so sad.
That's so sad.
It's
and really
sad,
sweet, but sad.
Really sad. So that's it. I mean, basically, we all, I think, had this idea that he's this rapist and murderer. Like, that is really my impression of him from the Hollywood Babylon book, which is, we all know now is a huge, shit show of disinformation.
It was an incredibly compromised trial, and the tabloids, the newspapers, they went haywire, and they were super irresponsible with the story. It was #fake news.
Absolutely. One other last sort of eerie, interesting detail is Chris Farley, John Belushi, and John Candy were all considered to play Arbuckle in a biopic that never happened, and each one of them died before the biopic even kind of got out of development. So the whole story just has this kind of tragic...
Yeah. Fatty Arbuckle, just the person, is surrounded by so much... just tragedy.
It's a curse.
It is a curse.
And then everyone who even considered playing him also met this tragic...
And Rob Ford's dead too.
He was never...
He was never up for the role, but in my heart, he was up for the role.
He's the Fatty Arbuckle of politics.
He really
He is very graceful. I mean, when he tried to hit that woman... Sorry.
When he's dancing to Bob Marley at City Hall, he's super graceful. I mean,
so we gotta love him. But so that's an interesting thing. We have lots of pics and clips of him up on our Instagram and Facebook page and all the good social media sites where we are. And you can find us at HollywoodCrimeScene.com. We also have a Patreon if you're interested in supporting us in our debauched excursions into Hollywood's dark side.
We provide a weekly bonus episode for you. Our bonus episodes are a lot filthier than our...
very fun scandals and urban legends and whatnot.
Sex rumors. We review sex tapes. And you can find that at patreon.com/Hollywood Crime Scene.
So thank you so much for listening. And
we'll see you next week.
Bye.
More taters, Mom.